Hello and welcome to the Ask the Industry podcast, episode 137. I'm comedian Simon Caine, and for those of you new to the show, this is the podcast where I interview the most influential people from the worlds of stand-up, comedy, radio, and today, TV commissioning and production. Lucy Lumsden is a former head of comedy at BBC and Sky TV. She was involved in commissioning for more than 2 decades and was the woman behind commissioning some of the funniest and most well-loved comedy shows in the last 20 years, including Outnumbered, Miranda and Moonboy. Recently she decided to swap sides, deciding she is not going to do any more commissioning and she is going to start her own production company. Yellow Door is the result of that decision. Yellow Door is a London-based production company that focuses on comedy and comedy dramas. We got into why she's moved away from commissioning, what unique things her production company offers, and so much more. In the past, Lucy has chaired the Foster's Edinburgh Comedy Awards, the Funny Women Awards, the David Nobbs Memorial Trust Comedy Writing Competition, just to name a few. Now she's running her own competition. Now, in order to enter this competition, you need to be a British Comedy Guide Pro member. Basically, Yellow Door and comedy.co.uk have teamed up, and Lucy would like to try and get some exciting and interesting stories from really motivated writers. At the time, if you're listening to this on the day it came out on the 1st of June, you have about 9 days to send in your script to her through that website. If you'd like to become a BCG Pro member, please do use the code ATI. It will save you £5 off a yearly membership and it will throw a few quid my way to help keep this show going. So please do use the code. I'm personally going to be entering the competition. I think it's an outstandingly exciting competition. If you get through the first and second round, your script is going to be optioned through Yellow Door to potentially be taken forward to channels. Doesn't mean it's going to get made, as we discuss in the podcast, but it does mean that you're going to have the backing of someone who has years of experience in TV and an ability and a keen eye on what a script needs to sell. So I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I think it's one that you should definitely jump on if you have some free time. I'm slightly annoyed with people saying that I've got free time because we're in lockdown, because I've had more to do than normal. But if you have some time in between now and the deadline, please do enter. It's a very exciting competition and it's not one of these ones that comes around very often. So that's my plug for that. Code ATI saves you £5 off that for the year. I love this episode. If I'm honest with you, we got lost in conversation and I just enjoyed hearing all of her thoughts and feelings on TV and commissioning and production and everything. I think this is going to become a classic ATI episode. I think if you're someone who wants to get into TV or TV writing, or even are just interested in the side of commissioning, you're just interested in what goes on in the head of a commissioner, or even you want to be a commissioner or work in TV yourself, so maybe you don't necessarily want to write shows, you want to work on the other side of it. There's something in this for pretty much everyone. I'm really proud of it, and I hope you enjoy it. If you're new here, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you're old here, please do remember to give us an honest, ideally positive review in iTunes. 5 stars would be great. If not, 4 stars would be great, as long as you write a review that reads like a 5-star. And either way, please do join the Facebook group. It's called Ask the Industry Podcast, and it's on Facebook, obviously. But for now, this is Lucy Lumsden.
In that odd time at the BBC, I found myself as the first controller of comedy commissioning. Ridiculous title. Yes, I don't think I particularly wanted the job, I'll be totally honest, right at the beginning, because it didn't really exist. We were trying to figure out how the best way of doing the commissioning system at the BBC, which was all about the channel controllers not having quite so much on their plate and sharing the load a little bit more. But hey, I was really honoured to get it. It was just, I was kind of young and, a bit scared of it all, I'll be totally honest.
How old at that time, sorry?
Don't know, about 34 or something. Okay. Was I that? Anyway, I can't remember. Okay. It was a long time ago. Yeah. But, yeah. I will be honest, it was quite a male world and it was a lot of saying no to people and holding your ground. It got easier as I went on, but right at the beginning, it's not just you in a job, it's like the job has to define itself and you're the one to do it. So you asked how did I scout for shows? I mean, really, that job at that time was almost just relying on all your suppliers to do that scouting job for you. I kind of found myself as this King Solomon figure to just bombarded by ideas, and you and the team, very much part of a team, trying to look for the best ideas. And it was quite difficult at times. People, very, very important people with amazing legendary status, and maybe occasionally saying no to those people and allowing some of the new to come through. Yeah, a lot of just trying to remember you are representing the viewer. It's a really privileged position to be in, making sure you're making the right decisions as best as you possibly can.
Completely. And in terms of, because it sounds like that's carried through, like they're still controlling commissioners now.
Yes.
So that was the start of this new way of commissioning.
Yeah, it was the beginning across all those genres.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I can imagine that I mean, what was the process like before? Were you aware of the process before you started? Like, why were they changing it then?
So before that, I was in this bit called the Independent Commissioning Group, which was set up to basically cope with the volume of indies ideas that were coming through, and that was very much seen as a separate bit of the BBC from BBC in-house. And I think the idea was to find a bit of the BBC that could bring these two bits together, and Mark Thompson, who was the boss at the time, saw what we call the ICG as the kind of model to base. It was really about the channel controller not being so overwhelmed with making every single decision, and trying to elevate, I suppose, experts in the industry to be helping making that decision with them. It was this twin tick system, which is good to a point, but it was kind of tricky at times. Like, where does the buck actually stop? Were you sharing that responsibility? And it's worked. And it continues to work for now. It was a really good time, very exciting time at the Beeb.
Completely. And why you? Did you find out why they picked you? No, so, like, there must be a reason why you, especially if you didn't really want the job. There must have been a reason why they picked you.
I'd been there for a while. I knew how the systems work. I think I really loved the job, and I really loved working with all the indies that I'd been, whether it was execing or when I started there, I was just reading scripts. So, and I hope I was good at being not a producer with their own axe to grind, but someone who could diplomatically deal with a lot of people just begging you to commission their idea, and kind of calmly trying to sift through and make the right decisions. So I don't know why me, Jana Bennett at the time liked my style, and it really worked, and I really liked working with her. So yeah, why me? I don't know. I was there.
It'd be my first question. I'd be like, why am I here? Well, what I find really interesting is because you've worked on both sides of it, will be more than aware of the process of getting a show made, and sort of how long it takes for that to go through. Yeah. And I wondered if you could maybe explain. I mean, first of all, there's loads of stories of previously the BBC would just invite in writers, and they would discuss, and they would work with them. Yeah. Was it still in that stage, or was it a case of you had a slush pile of indie scripts and ideas? Like, what was it like?
The process. Yeah. Well, that kind of the writers coming, that was very much more BBC in-house. You've got to remember the vast amount of producers there who are sifting through all those scripts. So when I was talking to BBC in-house, whoever was in charge, so it was John Plowman, would have already gone through and prioritised what he was going to pitch for that particular, they were a bit more strict about commissioning rounds at the time. And then from the indie world, we had those kind of key suppliers. And again, they've done their thing of prioritising what they want to bring to you. So don't think that my job was sort of going through loads and loads of kind of scripts, unsolicited scripts. It wasn't that. I sort of sat, for better or for worse, kind of quite high above that. So, my relationships more with the MDs of those indies, I really sort of trust those people, and I've really forged, I hope, really good relationships there. And then on the BBC in-house side, very reliant on the head of comedy at the time, and my time was mainly John Plowman, to have really, really gone through that difficult process, keeping all his producers happy, but making sure that he's not pitching, you pitch too many things, you're kind of cannibalizing what you're offering. I've always wanted people to talk about the thing they are screaming to make next. And those choices are really difficult because you're beholden to talent, you've got other things that are governing your decision decisions, but really the buck stops with what's the best thing. And I'd say for better for worse, because actually ultimately I found that a little bit frustrating. It was sort of a grand midwife to everybody's ideas. So even though I went on to Sky and did a similar job as head of comedy, ultimately I kind of thought, I'm missing being much closer to shows and writers and talent. That's why I left.
I was going to ask about that because you moved from BBC to Sky, and I wondered what the difference would have been like working for a public broadcaster to a private one. Like, did you, I mean, I don't know if this would be too specific, but did you have to go to meetings and like say, well, this show will get ads from these people? Like, because I'm assuming that there's a certain element, private broadcaster being more interested in profit than the BBC.
Oh yeah, hugely. A very strange thing can happen when I went to Sky, which was it was really freeing actually. And we had a really completely blank slate, and we did have a lot of money to spend, and we needed to see the results on air quite quickly. So amazingly, I was very protected by Stuart Murphy, who'd been the BBC Three controller, who'd come over to Sky to run programming. He was very good at letting us do our own thing, be left alone. And so rather than being rather beholden to a system at the BBC, being, as I say, very fair, magnanimous, and making sure everybody got the sort of fair shout, we actually targeted talent in a slightly different way. We sort of didn't have time to be too system-based, and it was, for a commissioner, a sort of interesting hybrid of being a bit of a producer, and we would make lists of who we wanted to talk to, and we went out and talked to them, and we were funded in a different way, so it gave us a freedom. So Sky was very, very different and very interesting, and I'm really grateful that we were left alone to make those choices, and thank God they turned out to be good ones. And trust, it was really nice to feel really, really trusted there.
I can imagine, because with freedom also comes restrictions, because even though you've been given more budget and availability to go out and find other talent in a less formalised way, obviously they aren't going to want 12 hours a day of comedy necessarily. They're going to have other slots and times and things. What constraints were put on you at the BBC versus Sky, or Sky versus the BBC?
So constraints at the BBC, I suppose, you're very slot driven. It's very specific. Your budget's really carved out, and it really didn't shift across the year. The commissioning cycle was very rigid. It was hard to be that spontaneous, but God, there were huge benefits. You had this incredible pipeline of talent. You had radio. You had all sorts of really good things in place that you were kind of almost part of a pipeline of ideas coming through. So Sky was totally different. We didn't have any, we avoided structure. We were kind of all quite ex-BBC. We were on the rebound of a kind of corporate training in our careers. So it was incredibly freeing. And not to say we didn't have targets to meet, we absolutely did. But it was quite an unknown. So we could take advantage of it being an unknown to bosses at Sky, to say, do trust us. We've got a really good raft of talent. Our big thing at Sky was creative freedom. So whatever shape, size, ambition of your idea, we think we can achieve it at Sky. So the Horrible Histories gang, we kind of said, what do you want to do next? And that turned into Yonderland, which felt incredibly freeing for them. And someone like Ruth Jones, who Stuart and I got to know, Gavin and Stacey, again, the conversation was more, what do you want to do? And we will pay for it. So Stella, being an hour-long show and ended up being 6 series, was that. Trolleyed was the supermarket sitcom. Possibly we would have, I've had that sitcom pitched, and it just was unfeasible given the size of a set and to portray a supermarket believably. But we didn't let that stop us from commissioning that, and it was a massive cost up front, but it proved to be cost effective as it went on. And then we did things like commission huge series of things. We'd commission 2 years worth of a show. We didn't have to tread lightly, and we didn't have to be too cautious. So that sort of form of commissioning was really freeing. I think there were a few lessons that could be learnt there, It was an exciting place to be.
I think the thing that I find really interesting is most people, or at least most performers that I know, aim for the BBC as their first sort of either radio or TV thing. And it always sort of appears to me like the BBC have structured ways of supporting writers to come through, whereas private businesses maybe, or private broadcasters, don't necessarily have that. Did you put anything in place, or was there anything in place when you were there to help sort of, mentorships or
At Sky?
Yeah.
So Sky, you've got to remember there was at the time, no Sky Studios, there was no in-house. So that mentoring, nurturing was happening within the indies that we were dealing with. BBC, on the other hand, has got this enormous, wonderful machine called Sky, BBC Studios, or, BBC in-house. And that's where all that mentoring, and you could bring on very new. I was very aware of that at Sky. It was very hard to do something, you've got to remember the ambition of it, and to do something brand new with a brand new writer. It was quite a bright sun that you were putting these people into. But we did do the occasional sort of new talent thing, but always harnessed with someone who I think could bring those people on. I mean, a brand new writer was Simeon Goulden, who wrote Spy, which Darren Boyd was in, and but that was very much under Jimmy Mulville, who took him under his wing. So I've always thought with commissions as a bit of a puzzle. There's an element to a show where you feel that's really exciting, really new, fresh voice, but there's someone around, there's an expert in there who can bring that person on. It's sort of, that's a duty of care almost to the newer talent coming through.
Completely, because you can't, someone, they're going to retire at some point and you need someone to replace them. And there needs to be some sort of process in place.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
I saw an interview of you where you said, you were asked what makes a good commissioner. And you said, you can't just commission your mates. That's point one. 2, you have to have a breadth of knowledge of other shows and people working in the industry. And you need to know that producers always know more than you. How do you separate personal feelings from scripts and people that you know versus people that you don't know that are coming in?
So, as a commissioner...
Either as a commissioner or yellow door.
Okay, so as a producer, it's really, really different, I think. I mean, as a commissioner, there is something about you're in a bloody privileged position. You are making choices on behalf of your audience, and you have to... It's impossible to put personal taste totally to one side, but there's something else that has to kick in, which is thinking for other people. I think it is the hardest bit of the job to really do that well. Producer, I mean, I felt it very liberating because I suddenly went, oh, look, I can, where is my taste? Let's have a little look at this. And it kind of took a little while, to read lots and lots of scripts and figure out, oh, look, I'm not drawn to that. I kind of probably would have been as a commissioner, but as a producer, I've got to probably stick around with this idea for minimum 2-3 years, and if it was successful, way beyond. So you have a hugely personal relationship with a project, with writers, meeting those writers, feeling you've got something to contribute, and knowing that you can go on the journey together and not hate each other by the end of it. So yeah, it's taken me a while to really to really get this huge responsibility that comes with the producer. Every word you say, you have to think very carefully about it, and every note you give, you really need to have thought through. It's something I take really seriously. Much more challenging, much more kind of intellectually challenging, and much more rewarding as a result for me. I mean, I've loved the last 3 years. It's been... Well,
because I was trying to put myself in your mindset while writing these questions, and I was thinking, when I went from what I know about the BBC and from what I know about Sky, they know what their quote unquote audience is looking for BBC Two and prime time or whatever it would be. And so I can imagine when you see an idea, you go, well, I just know that won't fit there, or I know that they're not going to put that forward. How do you? I'm trying to think, because I've literally started the question and then hashtagged it going finish that at some point, because I can't. It's sort of like, how do you? So say you at your own production company were brought an idea that at the moment you're like, well, you know what? I know the channels aren't looking for anything like this, but I'm drawn to it and I love it.
Yeah.
How do you validate investing time and money and effort into something that at the moment, at least, won't get made, or doesn't have a slot on whatever channel this person wants it to go to?
I would still back it. I mean, maybe I'm mad that way, but I again, remember I'm on the rebound of being a commissioner, so I get incredibly excited by anything that just I haven't seen before. I feel I just feel I've got to be part of something. I think there's probably an area of punt that sits on my slate, and then there's an area of pragmatism that that this is good,
Yeah.
and this is really likely to excite a commissioner or fit a need. I've heard that, you know, they're needing something at the moment. You have to weigh up. If you're being asked to spend quite a bit of money on something that's really a punt, I will think quite carefully about that. So, you know, it's now my money. You know, I've really got to decide how much I want to spend and where. So, a bit of a mixed ecology, to be honest. But I'd hate to not develop something because a little voice at the back of my head said, I think this is hard to get away. We have no idea what someone's looking for, and what a commissioner might have the same response as me, which is, I didn't think I wanted this, but that's so good and weird and something I haven't heard before. I usually feel if I'm feeling it, I've still got the wiring of a commissioner within me to have a bit of a shorthand of, they might think this might be worth backing as well. But I can't develop everything. So that's the frustration, is now and again you have to say, you think I've got two things in this area, similar things we used to have at the channel. You know, I really need to just go for one rather than spread things a bit thin.
I love podcasting. I don't know if that's obvious, but what I love about podcasting is, say for example, I have an idea. Particularly with audio, because audio is a lot easier just to edit and put out. I can make something and pilot it that day almost. Whereas with obviously video, you can do that with YouTube up to a certain point, but it takes a lot longer to edit video than audio. And something I couldn't see in your background, and maybe I've overlooked it, I'm sorry, would be, say for example, you loved an idea and you're like, well, at the moment, the commissioning rounds have happened, you know, it's not going to happen again for another 6 months. I really want to make something just so that when it's ready I can send it to them. Have you ever done a thing where you would make a 10-minute pilot of a radio or a TV show and then send it in afterwards? Like, yes. You've done that? Okay.
Yeah,
sorry for missing
I have done that.
It might be a private thing that I've not seen.
Well, often because they're like your workshop moments. Okay. So you're kind of experimenting. But yeah, I have done that. But you're right, it's bloody time consuming. Yeah. And you're spending your own money on it. So, I mean, it's an interesting one, because if you overdevelop something too much, and I remember this, you might have taken a bit of the joy of the commissioner's ability to advise and shape, and, you know, there's a real pleasure to be had in that. So there's a little bit of a trick to it of showing enough so that you yourself feel confident about it, but not making it so polished that you go, oh, well done, you've done all the work. I think I'd say someone like Channel 4 really particularly enjoy working with you. I like doing things to prove it works for me. And then, you know, when you look at a commissioner, and I used to have this, I could look into the whites of their eyes and be very, very sure that I know it's going to work. I've tried, I don't know, the new bit of talent everyone's talking about, but shall we see what they're like in this particular role? So there's that, but you've got to weigh it up. It's all costs money. Yeah. You can't do everything.
Oh, completely. One of the favourite notes I got given very early on, because I'd written something, and the first thing they said on it was, don't put the name of the talent you want to play that part on there, because A, they might want to work with you and pick people, you know, based on what they've got or who they work with, and B, don't, like, because if you can't get that person, yes, it will be the most heartbreaking thing in the world, where you've written it specifically thinking of it, unless you literally know them and you can say you've got to do this, then there's no point. So I know exactly what you mean on that front.
And you know, there'll be the right time for an idea, so you might have that person in mind, but they might be really famous for a different show in the year, and that means that not so looking out for another vehicle. I think also I'd say that, you know, you can verbally say these things, but committing it to paper is really, it's like a little bit of a contract. Well, say error. Yeah, it's suddenly cemented, isn't it? And you really want the idea to live quite freely. And then when the timing's right, or the right channel is interested, listen, you know, really listen to what your commissioner says, because they're giving you clues all the time. And be open and respond rather than dictate. Yeah.
Did you or would you ever just flat out go, no?
Do you have an idea?
Yeah. Or do you always give feedback?
Do you mean now? Sorry.
But it could be a
commissioner hat or producer hat?
This is the thing. I've separated these two parts of your career. So I don't know whether do you want to explain what your production company is, so that when we're answering the question as two separate parts, people know what you're doing and what's going on. Well,
okay. So Yellow Door is me. Yellow Door. But I think the thing that people might have seen recently is the Cockfields, which played out on Gold at the end of last year, which Joe Wilkinson wrote with David Earl, and had Diane Morgan in it, and Sue Johnson and Bobby Ball, Nigel Havers, Sarah Parrish, and we're really pleased with it. So I've done quite a few things, but I suppose the first sort of series that did well for the channel and is that Cockfields. So I kind of use Cockfields as a bit of a benchmark of the sorts of shows I love, which family is at the core, and a naturalism about performances, warmth. I love warmth. So when you ask me about if I say a flat no, I think I know really quickly now if there's a tone that I feel I couldn't live with for the amount of years it takes to get a show off the ground. And that's because I do need to now. Personal taste is a huge thing. It wasn't before. I was slightly putting that to one side to be, I hope, a good commissioner. Clicking with tone. Do we share the same sense of humour in this script? And let's cut the crap. If you don't, let's move on, because you'll find a producer who does share your sense of humour. And then commissioning is a boring answer to this, which is we've got something else like it, and that would be that quickest no is usually based on that one, which is a really annoying thing to hear, but it's a sort of fact of life. But hope, I've always not wanted to say no based on idea alone. I find that's madly short-sighted when it comes to comedy, and always wanted to see a script and hear the dialogue and hear characters come to life. So if you say no based on sort of setting alone, it's a bit bonkers, really.
Has there ever been a show that you couldn't make either as a commissioner or a production company that has later on gone to be made and you've regretted the decision? I
was really pleased, and I think I am pleased that I never missed the Beatles type thing. I was being hugely jealous of shows. I think something like Peep Show was frustrating because brilliant David Mitchell, Robert Webb had been working for the BBC for so long, early days, and then Peep Show came along. But I think that was, straight to Channel 4. I'm going to give you a really boring answer, which is I hope nothing was pitched that then was a huge success elsewhere. We're very privileged at the BBC, where you pretty much were pitched the biggest ideas first. So it's not like we were taking on other ideas from elsewhere. It didn't feel like it anyway. Yeah. Or people lied really, really well.
Does having a famous name attached to a script make it more likely to be made?
Well, I think you have to choose that piece of talent cemented to the idea very carefully. If it is someone who's already attached to something else, it is a real frustrating problem, because you've closed down the opportunity to discuss casting. But, if you're making your idea shiny and bright, and you want to put two pieces of the puzzle in place to make, all you're doing is making the other person feel confident that there's a rounded offer in place, then it can immediately open a door, immediately. So, and I think at Sky, quite often we would talk first and foremost in terms of on-screen talent. You look at a lot of our choices, they were vehicles for so-and-so. I mean, I don't know if you remember the Little Cracker series of little shorts that were designed to be basically, hopefully we kind of went to those national treasures, very, very well-known figures from comedy and drama, and asked them what their specific memory from their childhood, a kind of formative stage of their career, pre-fame, that was the idea, when they were like all the rest of us.
Yeah, not attention-seeking. Yeah.
So that was a sort of shameless move to get a star-led vehicle to Sky kind of quite quickly. That's kind of a bit of an exceptional commission, but just to show the power of a name. We started with the name, with those ideas, and then a little script would be devised around them. And out of that season came Moon Boy, if you remember that one, Chris O'Dowd's imaginary friend, kind of coming-of-age sitcom. And that started as a little short, so that was hugely pleasing that these little shorts spawned series. And
I think BBC Three are doing it with their, like, the online version of stuff like that. And I think I like the process of it going from smaller to increasingly larger projects.
And I think, there's a place for the one-off interesting thing to try out new talent, but really, if you're investing in talent, it's right, you should look at an idea that's got a life beyond it. Otherwise, it's like the end of the story, and it's a bit of a slightly mad waste of money. So they should be on a little path and feel very looked after by that channel. That makes total sense.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Obviously, TV trends change daily at the moment. You know, they're changing all the time, both in terms of audiences who are watching stuff and in terms of political correctness and in terms of what's being allowed. Have you ever had a show in the past that you made, or even just an episode of something you made, that wouldn't get made now?
I think tastes were more outrageous, actually. We got away with quite a lot. I think of a show like Monkey Dust, Harry Thompson made, which was absolutely brilliant animation that was extremely risque. I mean, I'm a big believer that comedy is the genre to say everything it should be. It depresses me if we feel that we're putting any restrictions on things. You have to look after a show that has a voice that is probably not reflecting the mainstream sort of POV, and make sure it is comedy after all. There's a bit of a contract with that audience that it will make them laugh. So use the different platforms on the channel wisely so that it doesn't chucked out there and shot down before he even tried by people saying it's not funny, it's not for me. I've avoided saying the word Fleabag, but I think there's such a great reason why it started in the theatre space. And so theatre, I went to see Phoebe in that first run at Soho Theatre, which was an amazing experience. But I'm so glad it was done on this tiny space where it could be experimental and really just felt Phoebe could say exactly what she wanted to say and then be allowed to grow in the right sort of spaces. I just think, look after shows that have a particularly strong flavour to them, because things get shot down so bloody quickly. We might be missing the next brilliant, bright, shining, loud, crazy, caustic, hateful voice. I
mean, my experience, especially through this podcast, has been finding that there are new trends, and that's causing slight restrictions on things that get made, or at least there's changes in what would have got made and what won't get made now. As much as I think being sensitive to more people being able to express that, I think that's something social media's allowed, is more people have been able to just say, actually, I don't like that, and I've never liked that sort of thing on TV. Yeah. Whereas before they might have had to send like a letter off to... They
did. I think they phoned the log at the BBC.
Exactly. God. And that seems a very much more personal and long-winded way of sort of articulating a problem. Did you ever, or maybe it was a little bit sort of into Sky more than BBC time, did you ever look at the conversations that were happening on social media for shows you were commissioning or putting out, and how much did that inform what you were doing next? I was a bit addicted. It is really addictive, because if you've come from the Beeb and it was this log and this remoteness of people... Right, oh my God, it's so archaic. But, I did look at the log when I was there. So Twitter was just this huge extension of that. I will confess, I was obsessed by Twitter. Went from it started. I found it just really fascinating to have that direct rapport with the audience. And remember, Sky very, very engaged with, it doesn't call them audience, it calls them customers. That dialogue between people who pay for you and making sure that they are getting something that they can't get elsewhere. That was drummed into us really, really early on, and I really enjoyed that and thought it was really important. We weren't just, I suppose, indulging ourselves with commissions that we liked, but we needed to see the evidence out there and immediately of what was landing. I mean, the curse of it also is that new ideas get shot down very quickly, but that's our job, to curate and filter and look at the sort of consensus probably by the end of the process. But it was very much in our weekly meetings. Social media was really, really, it had its own moment as a way of us measuring our success, and I think that was a good thing. No, I remember I had John Montague on this a while ago, who's one of the commissioners at Sky, and he kept saying customers, and I found that really interesting because I don't think of myself. I have a Sky account. I don't think of myself as I think of myself as a watcher or an audience member rather than a customer. Yeah, it's a bit like. What are they on Twitter or Facebook? They say you're a user of it or whatever, or something, and it seems really like you're trying to make me dehuman so that it's easier for you to sell my data. Yeah, like I'm a or a consumer of it or whatever. Like I'm hesitant to call everyone who follows me a fan or whatever, but equally that's much nicer than going I'm a user. Yeah. So I think language is really interesting between the two broadcasters.
That's true,
as well.
And the word customer took me a while to get used to it.
No, definitely. Do you think it was quicker or slower getting something created or made through private or public broadcaster?
I think it was quicker at Sky because there was less to go through. So I remember arriving at Sky and the desk was blank, and it was the biggest shock of my bloody life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's BBC, I'd never got to the end of the reading pile. Not any day I was in my 11 years there. Whereas Sky, I was like, oh, this is interesting. we got to generate this. These scripts are not coming in without us making a hell of a noise to shout about opportunity and money and what we were after. So it was very different relationship with our suppliers, which was going out and being proactive and targeting talent. And that's what made it really exciting. I mean, and less time consuming of feeling beholden to the pile of scripts. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
So it was very freeing. And we had a very particular thing to say to people. And we coined this phrase, smart mainstream. So, something different about what you're offering, but don't forget, we can't also make a tiny niche show that 4 people will watch. Be brave and bold and supersize your idea, and that really was responded to. I think we felt we were offering the whole industry something that they weren't hearing from any other broadcaster. I think that still feels the same today.
Yeah, I'd say so. No, because that would have been a really good springboard to my next question, but I don't want to move on from this point before. BBC have accredited suppliers, is it, or approved suppliers for shows? Or at least I've been told they do now. Like you have to be a approved supplier to produce shows for the BBC.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Is that not okay? Because I've had 2 people on recently who've been talking to me about that.
Then that's probably right. I just hadn't heard that terminology.
Fair enough. And I wondered if that was the same at Sky, or whether it could be any production house can send something in, or even any unrepresented talent can send something in.
I can't speak for how it works now, but when we started, there was definitely no list. That didn't exist. Sort of who's approved and not. That's quite funny.
I don't think so. I don't think approved's probably the wrong word, because I don't think it was, we're fine with you. I think it was more they had been, I think it's like the NHS type thing where,
some sort of track record.
You're a supplier or whatever it is. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose we did that in a slightly unspoken way of again, you've got to think we had a short amount of time to deliver big shows.
Yeah.
We sort of looked for the experts in order to achieve that. I'm not saying, so I remember doing very, very new shows like This Is Jinsey with a brand new company. We did a couple of those, but in the main you were looking for someone to kind of hold the hand, and they were usually big indies who had really impressive track records, but really not exclusively. That they were hopefully led by the idea. Just you want to make sure the people around an idea have got experience and aren't quietly massively intimidated by what they've just been commissioned to do.
Completely. Because I can imagine, as much as it's a nice feeling to get the commission, I reckon the next day is like, okay, so where do we go?
Oh yeah, I think it doesn't matter who you are, you still feel like that.
Yeah.
Leaving the meeting going, oh shit, if you're going to make this thing.
I regret every
decision. They said yes.
Yeah. I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought I could go home and come up with excuses for why they didn't.
I think everybody feels a bit like that. You get your ducks in a row and then you start planning.
Completely. Well, you weren't quite saying it, but you were talking about Sky and how their user base or their customer base are behind a paywall, essentially.
Yeah.
Same as Netflix.
Ah.
I wondered what you think of Netflix as a platform, what you think of on-demand players, and whether you think the collective viewing experience is worth ruining is probably the wrong way of putting it, but like it feels like it's naturally not becoming a thing anyway. But whether you think that's a missed.
I don't think the 2 things connect. I mean, I watch a lot of things as a collective experience that are like on Netflix with my family. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about this area. I mean, I think I look at it in a really basic way. Like, more platforms for comedy is a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think the difficulty is freaking well finding these things. Yeah. And I'm just amazed how this power of recommendation is such a big thing now. When my friends say you've got to watch X, I think I listen to that much more than looking at a poster and going, oh look, there's another big drama I have to watch. Because we don't have to watch. We don't have to sit there on a Monday at 9 p.m. and watch it. And then I was thinking about, there are still events. I mean, Gavin and Stacey, if I hadn't watched that live with my daughter who'd binge watched the whole of this 3 series, kept telling me, have you heard of this show called Gavin and Stacey? Yeah, I've heard of it. But I had to watch it live with her. So that was a really interesting moment. That doesn't happen very often. But when it does, doesn't it feel great? It's such a nice nice feeling to be all watching it at the same time. I am very old-fashioned like that, but it was great. Twitter couldn't spoil it for us. You're on it. You are absolutely on it as it goes out live. I've always been a big believer in watching comedy together. I love it, and I know my little family. My son will be watching his favourite comedy, but he'll watch it on his own, and I'm like, oh, it'd be really nice if we watched that together. This is never going to happen, by the way, but when it does, and it does happen occasionally, it's a really nice feeling, and you talk about it afterwards. You have shared a laugh, and a laugh shared is a really nice feeling. So I think it's something to keep striving for. We've definitely got to accept that people watch things on all different devices. I mean, we're so moved on. I'm a big believer in opening up loads of platforms and having much more dialogue between America and Britain. And I look at Succession. Succession feels a very, very British show. All that amazing production value and American gloss over it. For me, it's the holy grail. Be nice for British comedy to do that sort of job. Although I find Succession hilarious, so it sort of does the comedy bit for me.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd take a commissioning exec's lead on that, or whether there was an idea that, frankly, I've thought about the elements that matter to me. Yeah. Character, is it funny? Is it fresh, exciting, original? Is it saying something we haven't heard before? Those things that I will be thinking about. And then in that conversation with a commissioner, they might go, actually, this would be bloody good for this new format that we're looking at or we're investing in. I'm like, great. As long as it gets made, I don't mind that much. So, there's so much to think about already. I think if I then had to worry about devices, I'd probably go mad. Yeah. So, just trying to stay focused on the things that really, really matter to make a good lasting. I care about returning comedy as well, and I think that's when you ask what I'd sort of say no to. If something didn't have that life beyond that script, I think that is one of the reasons why I'll say no, even if the idea is quite good. I just can't see how this could convert to returning series, and that would be something I'd say to writers, is really think about that, because that's the world we're in.
Hello, welcome to the middle bit. I'm loving hearing about her time as a commissioner, how that came about, and how she handled such an important and varied job. It's just wonderful. I'm really loving all of this, and I really hope you are as well. Currently, I'm in lockdown, with no money coming in, as every gig that I had planned has been cancelled, every writing job that I had has been cancelled, and everything else is on hold. So I need to earn some money, so here comes your mid-roll ad so I can eat. Did you get an ad? If you didn't, sorry about that weird pause. If you did, I probably got 0.1p for it. So if you do have a few quid spare and you've been furloughed, or you have, some actual work coming in or whatever, I understand it's a tricky time for everyone, and so I do understand my audience, and I do understand what I'm asking at this very odd time for everyone. But if you have some money, or if you are able to contribute towards this podcast continuing, please do consider giving me a one-off donation via PayPal, or becoming a patron from $1 an episode. Is this worth 70p? I think it is, but I'm biased, aren't I? All the support is amazingly appreciated. Thank you very much. Let's dive back in. Yeah, I think because I've seen a lot of people working on anthologies, and I think Inside Number 9 has a lot to answer for that, because that's been such a runaway hit. But I think when you look at the backstory and the back catalogue of those two writers, you realise they've been writing those for years. It's not like they've just sat down and written 6 in 6 months or something. There's a longer story there that you sort of maybe work on them, but it might not get made now.
And accept the fact that the BBC have got Inside Number 9.
Yes, of course.
And have just commissioned another batch of them. I think anthologies are very hard to get away. You have to make it a very compelling reason why for a commission to make that an easy decision. Right,
so changing the subject slightly, Edinburgh Fringe.
Yes.
I found out that you went to Edinburgh Uni.
I did.
You did. So I imagine you've got a slightly different relationship to most people who just go up there for a month and then act like it doesn't exist.
And I lived there in the end for 7 years.
So straight after uni?
A bit of a gap. went back, did some directing up in Edinburgh. Yeah, so I know it very well. Yes, I do have a bit of a different relationship where everybody's going, wow, and I'm going, yeah.
Well, my partner, she lives up there, so I'm spending a lot of my time up there, and it's such. I think it's nicer outside the festival for many reasons.
It is a beautiful, cold, windy, beautiful.
I think they know that, so I think it's not. I think it's factually accurate. So that's not anything. But I'm
very fond of it.
What is your relationship with the Edinburgh Festival, and how has that changed?
It's changed enormously because when I was at uni, Bedlam Theatre was the student theatre was like this venue that we put the student shows on during the Fringe. So I can't say I don't think there was much hiring it out for other shows, but what would normally be a bunch of slightly drunk students coming to see our shows, suddenly you had like members of the public coming. So it was quite an interesting kind of first introduction to the Fringe, as it was fairly small at that point, and then suddenly went mad. I have to say my favourite Edinburgh was when I did the Fosters. I chaired the Fosters. I think it was called the Fosters at that time.
Yep. I was about to ask you about awards.
I'll tell you why. Because my God, you do it. Yeah, I mean, we saw so many, and I'm not going to moan about it because actually it was probably the best experience coming away from Edinburgh that year, feeling that you'd seen everything was just wonderful, and I did it just before I started my company, so it was a great sort of bridge at exactly the right time for me. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's absolutely mad. It's so massive now. Again, navigation is such a running theme at the moment of trying to find stuff. And I don't know what the answer is to that, because there's a lot of good there, but yeah, I think that would be my only when I think about Edinburgh, it's like, wow, you go up and you probably have, I don't know, those 3 days to make the most of those days, and it's just quite hard to navigate it now. That's the only thing. And early days, I think it was easier to I mean, I sort of hung out of either Gilder Balloon or Pleasance and a bit of the assembly rooms, and that was it. And they were just, by the way, one venue. Yeah. And now it's like assembly rooms is spread around the city. So you just want to make sure you have a good time rather than be totally bamboozled and exhausted by it all. And sometimes it can go a bit like that.
Do you... So I was going to ask you what you're looking for when you go up there. It sounds like you only go up for a short amount of time and don't do the whole run, as it were.
It depends what's going on. If you've got a production, so we were very, very engaged with my last show, so I couldn't really spend much time there. It's a quite tricky one because I really like seeing people I know, and I want to show my support for someone I might be working with. So that's probably half of the time is spent catching up with people and seeing how they're getting on and checking in and seeing if they're still alive.
I was going to ask what awards you keep an eye on.
I really like. I think there could be more awards actually.
That was the next question after that.
I'm just trying to think, because I mean, every producer would really value that. Again, it's needle and haystack time trying to find a script that feels honed and ready to go. And I do find awards are really helpful little guides to sort of say, oh, this writer's done that, and God, it helps when you're reading a script, someone's been shortlisted for X. I mean, the ones that spring to Rockcliffe is the one that springs to mind, mainly because I was involved with it. But you know what, the fact that I can't think of that many is not good, is it? I really like the Comedy Crowd lot with their website, and I think they're really kind of on it in terms of brand new things, more kind of clips of new ideas. But yeah, it's a bit odd, isn't it? I think there should be more. There was like the David Nobbs competition. We need to try and look at more ways for writers to get that little accolade that sets them apart from everybody else. I mean, tell me what awards you're aware of that I should be aware of.
I don't know if I'd be aware of any that you're not. I just, for me, I find I like the idea of awards, and I like that there's more of them now than ever because there's more people up there than ever. But equally, I don't think it's... So, for example,
Are you talking about Edinburgh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think like...
I was thinking about a kind of writers' award, but yeah, all right.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could... Yeah, true. Or we could talk about, there aren't really awards at the TV festival, so it couldn't really. Are there? I don't think there are at the TV festival.
No, I don't think so. No.
In Edinburgh, it seems like most awards are catered for, like from posters to production to whatever. But it always feels like, how do you get them to come and see you? Because it's clear they can't physically come and see everything. I know, like, for the Newcomer Award, they claim to see everything, or they claim to at least try and see everything, because obviously if they can't get in that day that they've scheduled you in, it's not their fault they can't, it's not their fault you're doing very well. So I guess it's, or if someone gets ill or something like that, I've had reviewers email me and say, really sorry, we let the comp go, but we're ill, we can't come, and everyone gets ill that month. So I don't know. For me, awards are useful, but I don't really look at them as much as I should in the month. But then that's usually because I'm performing and I don't really want to take it seriously until I'm at home.
To be honest, the thing, I suppose I look at it in a slightly different way now as a producer. I value the Writers' Awards, and you know why? Because I'm not really probably looking at the stand up. I look at the script first, and then I would populate the script with brilliant cast. Yeah. So in the way I look at it now in terms of comedy, those are the ones I really value. And I was just thinking that there could be more, couldn't there?
For writing specifically, yes. Yeah. Because I feel like they're very general at the moment. But then I don't know. It feels like when you become less general, people will use the. So if you had like a specific award for a section of comedy or a genre or something like that, you find people use the specificness of it to downplay how important it is. Okay. If that makes sense. Yeah. So I think it's a double-edged sword. If you've got more specific with a writing award, like the best under 20s, blah blah blah, they would say, well, everyone's better when they're older, or the longer they've been going, or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there needs to be certain kudos to the award for it to be meaningful. Which
is why I wondered which ones you look out for, or you keep an eye on.
Do you know, to be honest, I don't think I look out for them hugely. Okay. I think what happens when I get a sent a script, and if a writer says, by the way, shortlisted for something, I really, honestly, that matters, that I take note. Okay. But because I don't go to, it's impossible to keep up with everything, I sort of use it as a bit of a filtering system. Or you're a judge on these things and you're doing them all the time. But I feel I did a bit of that, and now I've got to invest in my time in scripts that I can convert into a TV show.
Completely. Yeah. I was going to ask, and it might be this sort of a similar answer then, what reviewers you read?
For comedy.
For comedy. Or even if, like, say we were talking about Fleabag earlier, if you were looking to go and see someone who clearly is doing a scripted play or comedy or something like that, which would you look at reviewers, or would you even look at on the posters?
I don't think I do look at reviewers. The fact that I'm pausing on this question, not that much. No, I think it's mates recommending people. Because I think you can be swayed by a review that had a very particular, relationship with that show on that night. Yeah, in comedy, I think it would be whose opinion I trust, and then I'll just in the chat that goes on, it's more personal recommendation.
Is that performers or industry people you're listening to?
That's my kind of producer chums, and more that. I guess people like me who can be quite objective and dispassionate, because otherwise you go, go and see my mate's show. It's like, I think each going to a show is a bit of an investment of time, so you want to be a little bit selective about who you go to.
Yeah, I feel like, because PR's obviously paid to have that relationship, or paid to cultivate a relationship at least, so that when they take on a show, you're, at least in their mind, statistically more likely to go and see it. But I feel like, in my mind, right, this is what I think is happening. There's like a comedy commissioners WhatsApp group. And like, you just go, oh, go check out this person. And like, it just gets sent round, and then you all go, yeah, that seems good. Yeah, we'll go,
I'll tell you group trip. Yeah, when there's a bit of that go, not WhatsApp
not
group,
a WhatsApp group.
But definitely going up to Edinburgh. Definitely, when there's the TV festival, and there's who to go and see, you're whittled down to maybe 15 shows, for better or for worse, but there's definitely a kind of a word of mouth thing that goes around then. Yeah.
Do you go for Edinburgh purely for work or for pleasure as well? Like, would you go and see other things that aren't work related?
Yeah, I did kind of semi-successfully went with my family, and we went to really, really different things, which was great. But ultimately, I had to be there for work. So you sort of go, that was fun, but I've got 6 of those shows to see elsewhere. It's always a tricky balance. I don't think I've ever got the balance right. But as I say, the most rewarding one was seeing so many shows. Like you either deep dive into it or be really selective. So, yeah.
And Yellow Door from your website says that it's very, like you deal with scripted comedy, scripts. So I assume when you're going up and watching stuff, you're maybe part scouting for, they look like a performer I could put in this, or maybe in the future, as well as, that was a really tightly scripted show. I think we could work together.
Yep.
So
definitely both of those things.
Okay. I was just going to ask what's. I mean, are you sitting at the back making notes? Like, what's your process for actually working Edinburgh? And probably offshoot to this. There's too many questions in one go. I understand. I can see in your head. You're
help.
Which ones? Look, he's just going to talk about YouTube again. But do you use social media to scout for them ahead of time? Do you use it to see what they're about before you go and see a show? Or
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know.
Because performers put a lot of effort into their social channels,
they?
and I presume that's mainly for non-industry people to take note. So I wondered if you did.
So I think I wouldn't be persuaded to see a show necessarily on the social media thing. I actually say that now and again, when someone does their little kind of little ad for their show, and you kind of feel a rapport with who they are, and go, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, actually, I think I have my head turned by those moments. But again, you're in a bit of a hurry to quite quickly know how to spend your precious 2-3 days. So the research goes on really with that chat. Now, obviously, that chat is with people who possibly are more influenced with social media than I am. So I'd say it's definitely effective somewhere along the line. Yeah. It just depends who's really plugged into that and who isn't. So, yeah. It's hard. Remember, I kind of do. I don't have loads of people working with me, so it's me, and I will really, really select kind of quite carefully. With TV as my end point, it's not really just going to see someone. It is thinking, okay, this person sort of had a really good Edinburgh last year, but this might be even better, and this is a tipping point for this particular bit of talent that just might have a series in them. But I tell you the other thing, usually those conversations have happened before Edinburgh. So you're seeing them sort of to confirm an idea. Yeah. And the best thing, I think, is to have been working with a particular piece of talent across the year. Edinburgh is possibly a bit of a moment to showcase an idea, but you're already underway. You might have done a shopping option for their idea. So Edinburgh is almost like the end point for some talent, rather than like the beginning of the journey with the producer.
Completely. I think that's a fallacy, that because there's a really nice romanticised story of going to Edinburgh and getting spotted and getting, I think because that's there, people think that's still the way it works, and in my personal experience, it's more you've met up a few months earlier. That's right. And usually they like what you've and what you've done, and maybe even just like the idea of something, and so like you said, they want to support you and see something completely different, because I was talking to, actually I don't know if I'm allowed to name them, so I'll tell you after, but let's keep it blank. I was talking to a specific performer who had an idea for a show, or let's keep it as they were on a show, which is a completely different persona to their on-stage persona. Yep. And they were talking to me about how when that show went live, it had an actual negative impact, because people came to see them not expecting what they got, and had people walk out because they were like, this is not what we were after. And but I think it comes down to, again, you still want to see every facet of that performer because you're working with them and you still want to support them. And so that's not a good example, but it's one of those things where you're not necessarily going to see their show because you're working with them on something else. You're going because you're supporting them in general.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. By the way, I do think it probably still happens that the Edinburgh show is the beginning of that cycle for someone.
Yeah.
I think you just got to bear in mind there's so much to see, so much to get your head around, to find that new producer who's looking at that brand new thing. It has got harder over the years because of the cacophony of noise. It's it's a great, wonderful thing, but it's all the work across the year in the venues that people know and love. I think that's where you're possibly more likely to forge the beginning of a relationship and almost look at Edinburgh as the showcase. Anyway, that's only my experience. There may be very different experiences out there, and I'm talking a load of bollocks.
Well, no, this is about you. So anyway, it's good to acknowledge that other people have their other ways, but this is how you deal with it. And I suppose, I mean, the most interesting one, or one of the most interesting people I've had on with this was they said, I might go up for like 2 days at the start, 2 days at the end because of the awards and stuff, but I'll sit down and go through the whole programme. And I'm like, how do you... I don't go through the whole programme, and I'm, you know what I mean, there for the month. So I think it definitely varies based on what you're doing and where you're going up for.
And where you are in your career, also as a producer, because when I started out and I did early days at the BBC, I had my highlighter out and I was going through the Fringe programme, and I'd go up and see a ton of shows. So it's slightly different then. So you evolve with Edinburgh. Depends where you are. Depends on how much time you've got. Completely.
And I know that you've judged, I'm not going to reel them off, but you've judged a lot of other awards as well. And I suppose, do you have a criteria for which ones you take on and which ones you work with? Like, I know, like between...
which awards? Or?
Yeah, which ones you'll be okay to judge? Like, do you go into it thinking, I can offer something to this if they offer it? Or what's your criteria for being a judge for yourself?
I suppose. Oh gosh, that's a really scary question.
Sorry.
I you know what? I think I hopefully channel the commissioner in me, which is, judging. You've got a. There's a bit of personal taste, but it's again just looking at a little bit objectively, because it's quite a big responsibility. That's the beginning of someone's career. You may not love their take on the world, but I think you've got to, it pisses me off if I hear someone say, that I didn't like that particular joke. It was like, no. Was it successful? Was their delivery confident? What was the quality of the material? And sorry, if it wasn't for you, you just slightly shut up about it. Yeah. That's my particular thing, because you've got a duty to judge them on behalf of an audience that sort of sits behind you. So that's my style. But other people can be very, very subjective about why they think a particular bit of talent deserves to win something or not. But I'm not selective about which awards so much. I don't think I draw a big distinction between them.
Okay. That actually has brought me back to a question I was going to ask before, because there's been a few things that have happened. I think this probably happened after your BBC time with quotas on TV shows, and most recently ITV announcing no all-male writers' rooms and things like that. Where do you stand on movements in that sort of area?
So bringing on more female writers?
Just as a general, like those changes, not necessarily specifically female writers or a non-all male writing type thing.
Right.
But
well, I think we were lagging behind, and it was getting a bit embarrassing. In fact, I was at
as in terms of progression for female writers, or
I guess that's what I'm sort of first and foremost in my head is. Being at a 50-50 event, and in fact with Saskia, and I remember some people coming up to us and going, so that's drama being taught, drama, and that was particular about actresses. So what's the comedy response? Yeah. And Saskia's been brilliant taking it on, and I know it hasn't been easy. You're any time you're waving a flag, and that's a slightly unpopular thing to be saying, trying to ring some changes, you're gonna be shouted down. But anyway, I'm very supportive, and I'm doing a few things to help in that area. So I think what's been tricky is just So I work with a lot of female writers, and I'm proud to I have a very 50-50 split on my slate. What I think is really frustrating is female-led on screen. I just want to try and make sure there's much variety, because there seems to have been a slightly angsty female voice that's getting through with a point to prove. I
get what you mean.
I feel we've had a lot of those shows, and I'm really, on the one hand, delighted because you've got a female-fronted show and many of them, but we must make sure there's a bit of variety. I'm a big fan of Game Face, for example, because I think there are brilliant emotional beats in that show. I mean, really powerful, and it's warm and entertaining and really, I don't know, I just find it's addictive viewing. So its range, it's like we don't all have to have baby flea bags on the slate. Please, let's make sure that we have a variety of voices coming through. But so I'm wondering for your question possibly. I just think we need to all be vigilant and keep our eye on when we've got too much of one thing going on. Yeah. And it is weird. It's slightly too much of a certain type of female voice. Yeah. And so that was good, but we need to move on, broaden it out. We can have such more variety than we have at the moment.
Completely. I think of it like maybe in the 90s you had far too many Manic Pixie Dream Girl female leads in films, for example. Yeah. And it's like, great, not great necessarily, but great, you've got them on screen and they're doing a great job of the actor in that, as actress as a part, but there are other voices to be heard in that area, so maybe let's commission something more than just them, because otherwise you run the risk of people thinking that's all they're going to be if they're not an actress yet and they're looking at it. Because you can't, what's the phrase? I think someone said recently to me, you can't be what you can't see. Like you've got to be able to see yourself going forward. And so I think that's always an important thing. I just wondered what you thought of maybe the way it's being handled, or the way that it's being dealt with, or how maybe how it's affecting your job. So it could be a positive. Have you ever benefited from some change like that, or have you ever been sort of had something not go through because of a change like that?
I mean, I definitely. Do you know what though? I was going to say I'm aware of a kind of the not the male-led show. Not you have to really really think carefully about the male-led show. And what I mean about is a particular voice, a sort of the hapless male that has been really successful in comedy. And I remember actually when I was at the Beeb that we knew we had far too many of these shows way back then, and we were saying, please, let's ring the changes. So I think in a way, when I look at a new script, I'm doing the same thing as I was then, which is this fresh, and is it something we haven't heard before? So that's where I suppose I'm just making sure that everything I've got feels different. And I love an autobiographical show. If anyone knows me, they know that that's really my thing, of what's the new point of view, and that awful word, overused word, authentic. But, the new story to tell from someone who actually bloody well knows what they're talking about. As a commissioner and both as a producer now, I crave those ideas, and I that's the challenge, I think, to make sure that you stand out from the crowd. So, and in terms of how it's been handled, I think you were always unpopular when we announced big changes at Sky in terms of diversity. You sort of have to make some really unfashionable statement in order to just shift the ground a bit and take a bit of flack, and that's going to come, and then everything settles down and everyone can calm down and actually look at what was behind that message. And it's just, let's broaden out the pipeline and who feels that they can be part of this industry, which can look really, really intimidating from the outside. So it's make it less intimidating, and hopefully what's on screen will benefit and reflect a more varied voice. We've still got to work on it. I look at a lot of TV at the moment. I'm still hearing the same sort of voice and the same sort of comedy. And I look at America and I go, there's great things happening, and we need to work harder here. No,
I get that. And I completely understand what you mean, where you But I mean, and this is more of a commissioning-based question than a production-based question. Like you said, sometimes you'll get something through and they'll go, we've already got one of those, or we've already got that sort of show. Would that sort of limitation ever help in terms of you getting more variety of different voices, or hinder in that the zeitgeist might want more than one sitcom or more than one show about a certain voice?
Yeah. To be honest, I try and ignore. I'm afraid I do. I ignore we've got too many of this sort of voice, because I just try and look at the script and its quality. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It might just be a question of you just wait a little bit. But don't give up on that script. Mm-hmm. And that has happened to me. I had a female-led show, and I know it's good. It's come along at a time where there's a lot of that voice, so we'll wait a while, but that script's still good. So you've got to sort of stick to your guns and not be. That's just that moment. There's that moment, and there's that commissioner saying we've got too many of this at the moment, and then there's a tweak that possibly could be done to set it apart from other things. And also remember, there's more than one broadcaster out there.
Of course, yeah.
So there's lots and lots of potential homes for a good idea. But if it's an idea that isn't very good and everyone's just being polite, really listen to that feedback as well. Completely, yeah. No, and not hide behind the they don't want this. You go, actually, maybe it wasn't very good. Yeah, no, I get that. You sort of it's a self-awareness of within writing, and I suppose. Well, I mean, we're going to get into Yellow Door a bit now, and before I ask that question, this will be a good one then to move these around. How do you know what's funny written down versus what's funny out loud? I think it's quite hard, actually. Yeah. Sometimes I can read a script and then we'll shoot that script, and there's definitely something like Cockfields. There's a massive laugh that happens because Diane Morgan's look as she responded to Joe Wilkinson or whatever it might be. Just gave us something that you could never see in the script. So the comedy in pauses is really interesting and very hard to feel it as you read. Does that answer your question? I mean, it'll always be, I suppose, you use your imagination when you read. Yeah, I think that. Oh my God, I've been reading scripts forever, but the quality of your reading time and the way you read and having the voices in your head, I think, you can get lazy on it. And I pick myself up if I think, actually, I don't think I've given that my best attention. So go back and read freaking stage directions. It's quite easy to gloss. You sort of go from dialogue to dialogue. And then there can be a vast amount of detail there that the script might not quite be. If you're being a bit lazy, you can miss. So, but I mean, it's the joy of converting something from script to screen, is all those little things that happen along the way that the performer adds and the director adds. So, but the script is sort of your base, your foundation stone, isn't it? Yeah. So, and the thing that you don't ever want to do is when there was a joke in the script, for that to not be on the screen by the time. You don't want that to happen very often because they're precious things. Yeah, and a lot of work's gone into it. And absolutely. Yeah. You obviously work a lot in scripted comedy. Is that because that's your favourite, or do you think that's the future for TV? Oh gosh, I don't know about future for TV. I mean, well, there's an interesting thing that people kept talking about, the golden age of drama for a long time, and I kept kind of saying, whenever asked, actually I think it's the golden age of scripted. And then I'm not saying I predicted the success of Succession. I'm not saying that, but Succession is really funny, and I'm really, really delighted that so many things that are drama, projected as drama, are actually, I mean, Killing Eve's hilarious. So anyway, there's a thing about scripted. I'm a real believer in it, and we shouldn't get too obsessed about those distinctions. And I suppose I just love it as a form because you can really properly explore character and take people on a journey and tell them a story and all of those things. I think I was just drawn to that more than that stand-up sort of world. I think it's not quite how I'm wired. I'm also a big fan, though, of the stand-up that's got the sitcom within them. So early days of Not Going Out and Lee Mack, and feeling that there was that rapport with the audience that made that audience sitcom feel just a natural progression for someone like Lee. I don't know, some delicious synergy happens at that moment. So, yeah, and a big passion is audience sitcom for me, and it was something I was talking a lot about when I was at the Beeb, which you keep having to talk about because it's so hard and writers don't want to write it, but I still think it's really important to have it in the mix.
No, completely. I mean, from an outsider perspective, if you like, from an audience or customer perspective, I see a lot of scripted comedy going on TV. I don't really see as many improvised things or as many ability to just sort of go off script on TV. I think that's partly, like you said, it's quite expensive to put something like that on TV.
Yeah.
I see it a lot more in podcasting. I see there's a lot of like improvised shows or free-form shows, and I just wondered where your mind would have been at leaving sort of the commissioning side, going into production, and maybe being aware of a trend there that, you know, if you have a 30-page script, you know it will last half an hour, you know that it will fit into these slots. And so I didn't know whether it was, like you said, autobiographical obviously fits itself a lot more to being a narrative-led thing rather than an improvised thing. So it might be that, but whether there's a trend in commissioning.
Well, the only bit I sort of keep wondering where the sketch show is in terms of a trend, you know, like a sort of missing ingredient. They're quite rare now. What I find quite interesting, I suppose, is that the 30-minute format seems to be shifting. Certainly talking to BBC Three, that they're not obsessed with the 30-minute form, which is
great,
really freeing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we also need to be conscious of the short form and the way people are viewing and wanting. Particularly with a brand new character, you might just be able to only cope with a short amount. So something like People Just Do Nothing was really interesting. That didn't it start on a really short form? No,
I'm not sure.
I'm going to talk a load of bollocks there. Ignore all of that. But anyway, what I mean is, I suppose these different shapes and sizes of shows, to be able to nurture them and grow them in a really good, healthy way before they're ready for that half hour. I don't think I particularly see a change in the trend, but if I was a commissioner still, I'd probably be aware of what's coming the next 2 years. But I have to accept that I don't know everything anymore.
Yeah,
that's so painful to admit.
I think everyone, there's loads of stuff everyone doesn't know, so but we don't want to admit it. No one wants to admit that.
No, it's painful.
Do you accept scripts from people without agents?
I do accept them.
Okay.
My caveat is I will do my very best to read them. And if I know something's not quite clicking with me, I will respond quite quickly, and I won't be able to I can't do sort of major feedback, I'm afraid. But if I do think it's got the beginnings of something, then I will definitely meet up and we'll talk more. So I do my best. It can take a while for me to get back to people because it's just volume of traffic. Yeah. I find it a bit mad when people say they don't accept unsolicited scripts. You know, I think
it's more trying to make sure their inbox doesn't get spammed more than.
Is it? Yeah, I just think it is our you know, the livelihood. It's difficult to get through everything, but then you can always say, sorry, I didn't have time.
Yeah, no, I get
that. That hard to write that.
No, I understand. What tips do you have for people that want to pitch a script? Weirdly, I'd almost just make sure your script's really ready to send. The power of that script, that is your calling card. There's no amount of chat, spiel, sell. I ignore all of that. It is the quality of the writing. So I think the biggest tip is don't send anything until it's ready. And by ready, really have run it by some people. If you've got mates, do a little read through. I mean, whatever it takes, but make sure that it is ready to be made.
I mean, that's what a producer's looking at, that they sort of don't have to do a vast amount of work to it. It's your shop window. It's everything, your script. I don't respond to any of the kind of gloss around a script. So, don't have long emails. You don't need it. It's the material will do all the talking for you to get that first engagement with the producer. And then it's a meeting. And I almost think, wait for a meeting until you've got someone who's really engaged with you. So your script has done all the breaking of the ice and all the groundwork in order for a meeting to really flourish. And use that time with the producer really well. That you got an hour of their attention, hopefully. So I kind of also say, it's a conversation rather than a pitch. Sometimes you're faced with a very nervous writer. And that makes me, everyone gets nervous. And really, it's a chat. It's just trying to find a meeting of minds. And you might have one script to talk about, but it's really great if you've got 2 or 3 other ideas that you just might want to chuck into the chat to see what strikes a chord. But you really keep it informal and fun and conversational. And then you'll get the best out of that person you're talking to. But I always think that meeting's only really good after you've sent them something and they've clicked. Because it's hard to do it cold, really difficult.
It's like everything. It's
it's life.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's sort of, I think you can lose yourself in feeling like this is my career sort of thing. Well, in reality, it's a relationship with someone that you, like you said. Let's say it takes 18 months, 2 years to even get it made, let alone seen in front of a it's a long time that you can't just hit send and hope that it's gonna.
But I think the regret sometimes is something was sent out before it was ready, and you kind of only got one chance. You might have just one chance with that person, so that's why that's so important.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct, but equally, like I think you can get, or at least I can get as a writer, I can get completely bogged down in, I could add another joke in there, or I can make that slightly tighter, or I can get rid of like 3 words there, or I can make this. So where do you, because obviously you don't want to see the first draft. No one wants to see the first draft, really. When do you want to get involved? Like when do you want to get involved in a script?
I think it's an interesting, if it's a brand new writer, so you're going from that standing start, you really are expected to see a pretty polished piece of work, particularly if they don't have a vast track record to be able to go, by the way, I made so-and-so and can show off about something. So you're asking quite a lot of that person to back you as really at the start of your career. It's, if you have got something of a track record and you've got a bit of, some sort of connection going, then there's not so much pressure on that to be so perfect. You've got a rapport, and so you've got a slightly more forgiving audience, and you can be really upfront about that and say, I think I'm at the beginning of the journey of this. I think I might be onto something, and actually here's a sort of sample scene. But that you probably need to have built up some sort of connection with that producer in order to be that kind of chatty. But so I suppose the scary bit is the first introduction. So in answer to your question, I really think that does need to be as polished as you could possibly make it. And then just be receptive, listen. If it's a good producer, they hopefully have really given it a bit of thought before you meet, and listen, and you don't have to do everything they say. Nod. And then come away and go, do I want to work with that person? Don't have to work with the first person who shows you any kind of love. You can chat to a number of people. You'll know quite quickly if you've got a really good project, because you'll get answers, and then you've got choice, and then you can choose who you'd like to work with. I think a lot of new people just work with the first person who shows them the slightest bit of interest. You don't have to do that.
I think, I know what you mean. It's one of those, oh God, but they might be the only ones, sort of like your first real love, or like partner or something. You're a bit like, I've got to keep hold of them because no one else will love me. No, people will, as long as you're getting better and
just be savvy, be smart. It's your own, it's a big deal.
Yeah, completely.
Ask around.
Yeah. What skills to overcome self-doubt to help people finish scripts do you have?
Say that again.
So what skills, maybe hints, tips, or anything that you've learned over the years to help overcome self-doubt on a script before sending or even finishing do you have?
I mean, everyone has self-doubt. We all have self-doubt. So that's a really good, human, wonderful thing. I mean, here's the boring answer. I think talk to trusted friends who you can share something that might be a bit shit with without them making you feel shit because of it. Honestly, that trusted person who you can experiment with, I'm a big believer in these creative partnerships, and that's a creative partnership, even if it's your mate down the pub type thing. But I think self-doubt's fine, and everyone feels it. You let's face it, you're making up a world from nothing, know, and you're convincing the audience that this is a believable place. You're lying brilliantly, and hopefully making them laugh along the way. Yeah, just try it out until the self-doubt voice isn't as loud as it was, and really get some people around a table and read it out. Read it out loud. You really know quite quickly. And if you're a writer-performer, do try and get up on stage and, is there a way you can do something of that character and see if that works? Try it out. Keep trying. Trusted people who won't laugh at you in the wrong places.
fail again or something like that.
Yeah, and you listen to the beginning. There's lots of stuff on YouTube about famous writers. Listen to them talk about the beginning of their careers. I don't think anyone arrived fully formed going, exactly what I want to do.
No.
And then also look at slightly safer spaces of writing in a team or writing on kids' thing, or is there a radio thing? I mainly deal in prime time, big half-hour sitcom, but there's loads of other places to be honing your craft. So yeah, even your Twitter voice is a really good place to do that. I really admire people who just get off their arse and just do a thing and create a character and put it out on Twitter. They're great.
No, completely. Right, so these are the last quick fire questions. Quick for me, you take as long as you need to do them. Who was the first person to believe in you?
I think I should say in the telly world, otherwise it all gets a bit heavy.
I keep it open on purpose so you can say whatever you want.
Please take these ums out. They're really boring me as well as you.
But now I have to because it's funny that you've made it.
I'll take it out. Christ on a bike. Do you know, I think it's back to Naira Park at Comic Strip, we had producing roles. It was not as creative, but just sort of sticking with someone like Naira, working with her was about the best training I could possibly ask for. So yeah. And then a wonderful, actually mainly, I'm going to be honest, women across my career who just went, can I say two people?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to say Danielle Lux at the BBC. And I sort of said, God, am I equipped to go to a read-through and give a writer feedback? And I'd never done that feedback thing. And she just gave me the confidence, like, you're a viewer, and whatever you feel, and if you think something wasn't clear or something's missing, you have the right to say it. So, and that was the beginning of this odd relationship of kind of editing and thinking, actually, I can speak on behalf of a viewer. So yeah, I think Danielle was great to work with and very nurturing, and I'll pay her later. No, she can pay me later.
Again, another open-ended question. What is the best show you've ever seen?
I'm going to say a recent example just because it hasn't just been a good one-off show, but an incredible series, and that's Succession.
What is the best book on comedy writing or stand-up that you've ever read?
It's a slightly different thing, but David Nobbs wrote an autobiography. And what I love about those autobiographies is that you see the journey of someone who had all the self-doubt we've talked about and had it all through his career. Now seen as, a veteran and godfather of, amazing shows like Reggie Perrin. So I love an autobiography. So I think I'd go for David Nobbs' autobiography.
What's one unpopular opinion about the TV industry that you have?
I suppose celebrating female voices but trying to ring the changes and broaden out what sort of voice that is. And I've said it and occasionally get shouted down because, you know, it sounds like I'm not celebrating what's already out there, but I suppose the feeling behind it is, and make sure we have range, keep our eye on that. You know, please, we're not all angst-ridden and totally screwed up. There's another show, I think, to be done, celebratory and joyous, and those aren't bad words for comedy.
I think the thing that I see whenever that sort of thing happens is I don't quite understand that sort of feedback when it comes through, because you sort of think, I think most people who are saying stuff like that have the best intentions for what they're saying, whereas I think most people see it as a personal attack on them that are sort of feedbacking on it. And it's like, you know, if there is a quota or if there is a diversity or any of that sort of thing, if you didn't already get the 9 slots that are available for, let's say, a white man, you weren't going to get the one they've now quoted. It just seems really odd to me, like, in that respect. So I know what you mean, but I've never understood that feedback from people. And I suppose, I don't know if you get it worse than I would because of the position you're in.
I think sometimes, because any sort of the underdog point of view in comedy, it needs to be saying something that has to be sort of slightly tortured. Maybe this is just my paranoia about it, but I don't know if we have to always be making a major point. Like, just enjoy and entertain and celebrate, and not get too hung up on a majorly chewy, tricky. You know, there's fine, and there's loads of brilliant shows like that. It's just, let's make sure we're keeping our eye on keeping that joyous, warm. I love warm comedy, and I want you know, it was an out and out half-hour comedy shape, but Wurzel Gummidge at Christmas was just a total pleasure. And so, yeah, uniting us, getting us to watch comedy together is a good thing. It doesn't have to be an angsty thing always.
What's the biggest misconception people have about what you do?
God, that's so hard to answer because I don't know what a misconception is. I mean, about me, I know what a misconception is. I think I'm going to slightly answer this in an odd way. I think I've had to learn to not feel like an ex-commissioner. Right. Because I did that for 16 years, and that's quite a long time to do that job, and feel like a kind of program maker and producer. And I don't know, how I'm perceived, but I think I've had to move across and recognise that I'm not an ex from something that went before. I'm moving forward, and I think that change happened for me last year when we made Cockfields and went, okay, this is it now.
This is you now. Yeah.
We're on this path now, and it feels very good. So. I've fudged the question, but I think that's something I've personally been aware of, just moving. It's hard to completely change your identity within the same industry, but so it took me a little while to get used to that and not look back, but look forward.
Completely. No, I get that. What is the most interesting thing you do that no one else gets to see? Interesting thing I do? Well, I suppose my secret thing is I paint and I draw, so that's my other life. What style? Any particular? Oh, a kind of line. Oh, what style? God, I don't know. The sort of those sort of block line things. No, like life drawing and drawing from life, I suppose. Like what style? Balls of fruit type thing, or that's all I think of. Maybe a bit more interesting than that. Oh, sorry. Is that like the entry level? No, it's fine. No, it's like illustrating and blah blah blah. That's it. As you can tell, I'm not very good at talking about it. No. Have you ever done artwork for a show on the back of that, or is no? I sort of keep those things apart. Okay. It's my little thing on the other bit of me, which I really like keeping going with. It's nice diversion from day to day. It's worth having something outside of your actual job. Yeah. I get that. Who do you think is the most underrated person in the TV industry? Oh my God. Can you take out the oh my gods? No, they're staying in. Oh, bloody hell. In fact, I'm going to cut and paste them just more in. There are some amazing people who are just so wonderfully egoless. Okay, you may not know Claire Broughton, but she worked for Hat-Trick for years, and she's one of these wonderful unsung people, being Jimmy Mulville's assistant, and I'm a huge fan, and she's actually left and is going to be producing, I think. And so, but the people might know Claire. And so there are a lot of people like that who kind of the wind beneath the wings, who haven't craved being in the limelight, but are really, really valued. So I'm going to say Claire. Yeah. Yeah, they're the kind of people where things wouldn't happen without them.
Yeah.
And they still don't want you to know who they are.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Yeah. There's a lot of them in the industry.
Yeah. No, it's why I asked that question, because I always think it's worth knowing people who don't get that moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest problem in the comedy TV industry, and how would you go about solving it?
Oh, God, that's a massive question. Hold on.
Should I move that to the front of the podcast next time?
I'm just trying to think of what's the biggest problem. Sorry, big pause.
That's okay.
Cut the pause.
I will edit the pause.
It's hard to think of the biggest. Sorry, I'm being very literal.
It can be just the biggest that affects you, or that you think affects a part of the industry that you would like to see changed. I try and keep these questions open, because they're more about how you see the industry than the way that I want to ask you a question, if that makes sense.
What I find tricky is that industry-wide thing. I mean, it's not an exciting answer, but I think...
Cut.
Sorry. I think we've still got to work so hard on making sure that we are making sure our comedy reflects the breadth of Britain. And keeping it joyous as well. So we can think we're doing loads in that area, but we're, unconscious bias, I think it's inevitable, but maybe we should look at those commissioning teams. Hey, when I was in commissioning, I was white female, so it's hard for me to do a vast amount about it. But just make sure that there are fashionable ways to behave as a commissioner. There's a fashionable way to speak, to feel that you belong within a group of people, a group think, and you've got to try and let those individuals come through with a different opinion from yours and a different set of talent that they think should be being heard. I've just got to keep working on it, keep talking about it. Yeah, I think that's the thing. I'll still go back to making sure that those commissioning teams feel representative of the audience.
What is the biggest disadvantage of being you?
Being me.
Yeah.
I suppose it's again me coming to terms with the fact that quite late in my career I've flipped to the other side. So, and I used to really know everything, and I've got to really get used to not, and let other people. That's their time now, and actually enjoy all the freedom that's come with being my own boss. And I mean, amazing feeling of going on one's own set. And your show is happening, and that's such a buzz. But it took me a little while to get used to there's a lot of trappings that come with those roles, and you're taken up for lunch every 5 seconds. Everyone's sucking up to you because they want something from you, and then that stops. And you have to completely rework your relationships with people who used to look at you in a completely different way as someone to pitch to. So that's been something to kind of really, really work on. But yeah, a real change happened with getting my series going. That was a real buzz and kind of defined me in this new role.
What was your first artistic stumbling block, and how did you overcome it?
Do you mean is Yellow Door? Do you think?
Yeah, probably more as Yellow Door, or maybe as a writer, like in stuff that you've worked on. Like, what was the first thing that basically you sort of hit a roadblock, or sort of, everything was going well and it derailed what you were doing for whatever reason?
I think that first year of developing ideas and feeling if I was a commissioner, I would go for this, and in fact, I did fine, and it was really nice. I had a lot of development to ideas, and then those ideas did happen, and some didn't happen. And I suppose that was it. That first year of having my own company and having to really adjust that someone else is now going to possibly say no.
Yeah.
So. But then I'm no fool. I knew that was coming, but it really feels painful when it happens. And if anyone says it doesn't, they're bloody lying. Yeah. So yeah, something you really, really believe in, and you really are sure that it would happen, and then it doesn't happen. You go, okay, this is what this feels like, and I've been the one saying no before, and I've got to take the no's now. And you pick yourself up, and the other thing, you have loads of plates spinning. So if one doesn't happen, something else will, and so keep busy and keep engaging with fresh ideas, and then every day is so exciting because it's you don't know what next door will open. So yeah, first knockbacks weren't easy, but it's about getting used to this role.
Last question. If you could go back to any point in your career and give yourself one bit of advice, what would it be and when?
Well, I think it was when I got the controller of commissioning job, just feeling a little bit more sure about the fact, you've got the job.
Yeah.
So again, a bit of self-doubt and what's the term for it is imposter
Syndrome. Yes.
Imposter syndrome at the beginning of that role, and there's no in a way there's sort of no point, because I think I was just that sort of person at that time, going, bloody hell, I've got this job kind of quite quickly, but get on with it a bit more quickly and stop worrying about it. But hey, it was a great job and I really, really enjoyed it. That was then, but this is now.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was Lucy. Oh, I loved hearing her thoughts about the future of TV, her unique and interesting relationship with the Edinburgh Fringe. Of course, moving from commissioner to producer means that she has a full-rounded view of TV land and everything that goes on within it. As mentioned before, Yellow Door and British Comedy Guide have teamed up to offer writers the chance to submit a 10-page story to potentially get picked up to be developed into a script that will be optioned and taken forward to TV channels with Lucy and her team behind it. An amazing opportunity, doesn't come around every day. So, if you want to enter, you need to be a BCG Pro member. In order to do that, I'm a member and I love it. I use it probably 3 or 4 times a week, which is pretty good for a website that isn't a social network site. It's absolutely awesome. It's really helpful. It has behind the scenes content. It has unique content. It has competitions like this one coming up on a regular basis, including their weekly writing challenges. So I really recommend it. I highly love it myself. If you use code ATI, that's ATI, you save £5 off a yearly membership, and I get a few quid towards the running costs of the show. So please do use that code if you're going to sign up. Also, Lucy spoke a bit in the podcast about John Plowman, a former ATI guest, and I highly recommend his podcast. I'd also going to recommend the podcast with Mark from the British Comedy Guide, where he goes into more detail about BCG Pro, what that side of the website does, as well as what the website in general does to support comedians at all levels. I really, really think you'll get a lot out of those. So, the Ask the Industry podcast is a fruit that got in gravity's way production for the internet. All elements were created by me, comedian Simon Caine. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for subscribing. And thank you very much for rating and donating if you do. I'll see you all in about 14 days' time. Bye.